Well, hi everybody. Just thought we'd look back at 2020 and something that was memorable to me in this year regarding match fishing. Now, what I'm going to talk about is a little bit different because I didn't want to just sit here and say, oh, I fished this brilliant match and it was amazing because I caught loads of bream and won the match and, you know, that sort of thing. I don't always think that's the best thing to do. I mean, obviously it's great on those days and it's lovely to talk about, but I wanted to talk about really a time of this year that changed for me and how I really enjoyed that time and I enjoyed the challenge of that time, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about the most. So it comes off the back of a really successful weekend. We were obviously locked down for a long time, like we all were, couldn't go match fishing, and I just felt that I was really up for it. You know, everything was immaculate, probably like everybody. Everything was ready to go. And I had a cracking start to the campaign as we went back out. I drew an absolute flyer on one of the Riverfest qualifiers on the Weaver and had a stunning day catching £40 plus of bream to actually win the match and qualify for the final. So that was like amazing. The following day I went to Stunton Harold. I was, you know, some fantastic anglers on that match, and I had a brilliant match again, caught 50 plus pound at long range on a feeder to weigh 53 pound, I think, and was second in the match. I nearly did a double weekend, and to be honest, I was flying. Everything was going amazing. I don't want to dwell on that too much. I don't want to talk too much about the tactics there, because I want to talk to you about what happened next. Over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks, it was like something changed for me. I went back to the River Trent and started fishing on the Tidal Trent. Fished a couple of Trent Opens, went to Stunton Harold a couple of times, went to Southfield a couple of times, and you know, I couldn't catch anything. I just couldn't seem to get that right side of the results. Now, I've been really fortunate in my match fishing there. That hasn't happened to me loads of times, but it has happened a lot in the past, and those times seem to be getting a little bit less and less every year. But I needed to work through it, and you know, it started to get really annoying. I was starting to get very agitated because I felt like, for a start off, I had a couple of bad pegs. Then I sort of had an average peg and didn't make the most of it, and then I had a peg that should have done better and didn't do very well, and then a couple of rubbish draws. And so when you have that run, when you have that period of time where, let's say you fish 10 matches and 6 or 7 of those you're on really poor pegs, that is going to happen, okay? And then you get a couple of average pegs and maybe one decent peg. That's how poor runs happen, because what can happen in there is you probably don't do as well as you'd like to have done off the poor pegs, and then when you fish the other matches, you probably are trying to force things a little bit, trying to make something happen in that match, which is what I felt I was doing. So the match I really want to tell you about was the first day of the Tidal Trent Festival, and I drew peg 18 at North Clifton. I'm just trying to think, was I 18? I was 18 at North Clifton. Now, on this particular day, it blew an absolute hurricane, and I mean a proper hurricane, and the river was high. The river was, you know, there was a big tide and the river was really high, and I absolutely adore fishing on the Trent. It is probably my favourite place to go fishing on the River Trent. I absolutely and utterly love it. I love the challenge that it presents, but I'd had a couple of iffy matches, to be honest. It had been a bit iffy in the teams of 4. I'd done okay. I can't sit here and say I'd done particularly well up until this point, and the team had been doing well. But again, I hadn't drawn particularly well in the matches, but I think that started to put the seeds of doubt in my head, and I was experimenting with the way I fed my bait, how much bait to feed, how regularly to cast the feeder, big hooks. And on this particular match, I started the match and I caught a skimmer pretty much second chuck, and it was really windy. It was really hard to tell what was going on, and the water was coming up with the tide, and I was a bit cocky really with where I put my box. I thought, I can put my box there. Anyway, within no time at all, I couldn't sit there anymore. The water was almost up to the top of my box, so I had to move myself back. And I moved myself back thinking, well, it'll only come up a little bit more. Wrong. I had to move back again. All this in the middle of a gale. And I got lazy. I was lazy. I'd settled into this like, well, I'm not going to force this too hard. I'm not going to think too much about this. I'm going to fish a feeder in this wind and I'm going to fish a big hook, and I'm going to be nice and positive. You know, and I'm going to put worms in, I'm going to put lots of casts in and all this sort of thing. Anyway, this is how I fished. It was an absolute disaster. I ended up actually doing okay. I think I was like 4th in my section or something, 4th in my 10 pegs, but I didn't do very well. Not in my head. I think I weighed 13 pound. Matt Godfrey was just up from me. He weighed 17 or 18 pound. He was second in the section, I think. There was a 25 pound just 2 pegs to my left, and I just knew I hadn't done very well. You know, they didn't catch anything either side of me, 4 or 5 pound, but I know that I didn't do very well, and I was complacent. And complacency is what I want to talk to you about, right? You don't know it all in fishing. You never know it all. You have to be thinking. And that day, it's been a long time since I've driven home from a fishing match as angry with myself as I was that day. I was absolutely fuming the whole way home. All that night, I was in a rotten mood, and I was really, really, really hard on myself because I knew that match was a combination of the bad run that I was experiencing and like a laziness, I wasn't prepared to work because lots of things went against me. I wasn't prepared right. I didn't sit my box in the right place. I tried to, you know, take it steady on the bait. I didn't think when the bites ran out later on. I didn't move position. It's like my brain had switched off for a match, and I was cross because that was the peg to get me back going again, to get me back going on the run. Anyway, the following day of this 3-day festival, I drew not a brilliant peg 4 at Launceston. It's not a fantastic peg or anything like that. And I had an absolutely brilliant match. I fought on my feet. I changed a few things. I changed my hooks. I changed the way I was hooking bait. I changed the type of bait I was using. I changed what I put through my feeder. I started putting casters and hemp through because I was catching some roach, and then I adjusted that slightly to try and nick a couple of skimmers. Then there was some dace came into the peg and I could change, and I cut a little bit of hemp out, and I adjusted it all the time. I was working hard all the time. I hardly put any bait through for a period of time. I actually wedged my feeder full of just ground bait, 5 or 6 casts in a row, just to, you know, keep the less bait going through because I needed to manipulate my peg. And I ended up weighing 15 pound, and I had a bit of luck, by the way. I had a 2 pound eyed, but I had 15 pound of dace, perch, roach, and this big eyed to do brilliantly well. 7 pound was second in my section that day, and I did really, really well. I was absolutely over the moon. It was a complete and utter turning point. My brain had changed. I'd gone back into the river angler that I knew I could be and I knew I wanted to be. And that was the key turning point, or the key moment for me in 2020. Off the back of 4 or 5 weeks of very average results, I then pushed on. The next day I drew a terrible peg. I drew peg 13. Torksey, which anyone who fishes the river, it had been last or 2 days before. It was a terrible peg, and I actually came second in the match and won my section with 16 pound on the feeder, thinking about what I was doing. I then went on to fish 5, 6, 7 more Trent matches over the next few weeks, winning my section or doing very well every single time, framing in the match for that period of time. It was like a complete shift from what had happened before. And what the key for it was thinking carefully about what I was doing, not being complacent with how I was fishing, and adjusting things that I needed to adjust to get the best out of my pegs. Talking to my mates about fishing, talking to the likes of Matt and Rob and Joe and Mick Viles and people like that, all my very close friends about fishing, just to come and sort of get over it. And do you know, while that period was going on, I actually really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the tough period because sometimes I've had some great runs of results for long periods of time, and I love that. I love that period when you struggle to overcome it. It's a challenge. That is what life is about. Life isn't about having it easy all the time. You've got to have those periods in anything, but in fishing in particular, when you can overcome them and get that right side and catch those few extra fish. And that period is something that I definitely felt was brilliant for me in 2020. Now, I hope in 2021 You guys that are going out match fishing, you can learn from these sorts of experiences. It happens to everyone in angling. Make sure you're on top of your gear, make sure you're on top of your feeding, working hard at your fishing, and I guarantee you, if you work hard and push through, you will get results. All the very best for the new year, and I'll see you soon.
If you like these little videos, check out all our content elsewhere. Instagram, Facebook, we're absolutely everywhere. But more importantly, check out the website.
It's the website, it's all about the website, www.anglingedge.co.uk. On there you'll find incredible long videos with tons of detail. Honestly, Rob, we love doing them, don't we? And there's so much there for everyone. That is the place to check out all our stuff.